There's another way to help to make sure that we have enough dentists and doctors. It's to make sure that those who are currently in the United States in dental school or medical school who are protected by DACA have a chance to remain in this country. By way of background, 20 years ago, I introduced a bill called the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act was designed for those brought to the United States as children, infants, and toddlers who were brought into this country, perhaps on a visitor's visa, and overstayed their visa and didn't file the necessary documents and soon became undocumented in America. They didn't leave, they grew up here. They were little kids who grew up in this country, going to our schools, being part of America, and believing America was their future. Usually, sometime in their adolescence, their parents would sit down and tell them the grim reality that they had no legal right to be in this country. And despite the fact that they knew no other country, spoke no other language, pledged allegiance to the same flag we do, they were technically not legally in America. So I introduced the DREAM Act to give them a chance. If they completed school and had no serious criminal issues, they'd be given a chance to become American citizens. The bill went back and forth. It would pass the House one year, pass the Senate the next year, it would come up with a majority in the Senate, but not 60 votes, and it languished until I appealed to the President of the United States, then Barack Obama, and asked him if he would consider creating by executive order some protection for these young people, and he did. This was the DACA program, and under DACA, these same dreamers that I mentioned earlier would pay a substantial filing fee, go through a criminal background check, and be given for 2 years, they despaired of any threat of deportation, and be given the right to legally work in this country. So how many young people showed up for this Obama DACA program and went through it successfully? 800,000. 800,000 from all around the country, just to get a chance to go to school, to complete their dream, to even serve in America's military. They just want to be part of this country. 800,000. What was going to happen to this program when a new president named Donald Trump came in office? The very first time I met President Trump was just minutes after he'd been sworn in as president. There was a lunch for him, inaugural lunch in the Statuary Hall. And I went up to him and introduced myself. And I said, Mr. President, I'm begging you, do what you can to extend the protection of DACA to these 800,000 young people who are counting on it. And he leaned over and he looked at me and he said, oh, Senator Durbin, don't worry, we're going to take care of these young people. Well, that was the president's assurance, but unfortunately, he didn't keep his word. He decided, unfortunately, to abolish the DACA program, saying that President Obama had no authority by executive order to give this kind of protection. And then a number of people filed a case in court saying that the executive order of the president should or should not be sustained. It had to be contested in court. Luckily for the DACA recipients, 800,000 of them, while the court case has been pending, they've been protected by court order from being deported. But the decision is going to be made by the Supreme Court, and it could be made next week or in the 2 weeks that follow. So in the month of June, the fate of 800,000 of these young people will be decided across the street in the Supreme Court. These are young people who have become an important part of America. When the Republican senator from South Dakota talks about shortages in medical personnel, I hope he knows that 41,000 of those DACA recipients are currently providing vital health care services in this pandemic that we're facing as a nation. And if they are judged to be deported and illegal to work in this country and leave, it will leave a gap in medical services that this country desperately, desperately needs. Some of these young people are incredible. Their stories are nothing short of amazing. I would like to tell you one here at this moment. Mariana Galati. This is her photograph. Today, I want to tell you that she is the 122nd dreamer whose story I've told on the Senate floor. Mariana came to the United States from Mexico when she was 5 years old. She grew up in Camden, New Jersey. It wasn't an easy life. She grew up in a single-parent household, and her mother did not speak English. Here's what she told me about it, and I quote, "I had to fend for myself at a young age. I feel like I never got to have a childhood. I tried to never let that backdrop define me or stop me from my dreams. What was her dream? To become a nurse. While working in a bakery, she went to a technical school to become a medical assistant. And then, in 2012, President Obama created DACA. Mariana was able to work as a medical assistant. Here's what she said about DACA, and I quote, "Before DACA, I had no future, no purpose, no chance of a better life. The fear that with DACA that I have," she says, "is that it would go away. An expiration date approaching that means that I would have to go back to the way things were. Now I understand why we are called dreamers. Because before DACA, all we could do was dream of the life we wanted to have, to dream about being someone." While working as a medical assistant, Mariana is studying to become a nurse. She is now a junior at Rutgers University Nursing School. Here's what she said about that experience. "To be a nurse is a way of living. I do not look at it as a job. It is beyond that for me. It is a calling. Advocating for and giving people a voice is a reward within itself. Helping people in their time of need, where they are most vulnerable, is a privilege." Mariana is currently on the front lines of fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. She is a registered medical assistant at the Jefferson Cherry Hill Hospital COVID-19 testing center. She faces exposure to that virus every day that she goes to work. She takes every shift that she's offered. She says, and I quote, "I have to be there. I want to be there. I'm not scared, but I am scared at the same time. I know what the risks are." I want to thank Mariana Galati for her service. She's an immigrant health hero. She's putting herself and her family at risk to save American lives. She shouldn't have to worry about whether she's going to be deported next week. We can do better for Mariana, from thousands of other DACA recipients just like her. They're counting on those of us who serve in the Senate to solve this crisis that President Trump created. I cannot imagine, as I tell the 122nd story of a dreamer on the floor of the Senate, that anyone listening believes that we would be a better country if Mariana would be deported. But that's the option that the president has created. He has failed and refused to consider any solution or any effort to rescue people like Mariana and to give them a chance to be part of America's future. When we look at those in essential services, medical and social services, it turns out that a third of them are immigrants to this country. I know it's not a popular thing to say with this administration, but I have to remind them that we are a nation of immigrants. My mother was an immigrant to this country, and her son has been fortunate enough to be elected senator and represent the great state of Illinois. That's my story, it's my family's story, but it's also America's story. We are in this together, and people from across the world have come to this country to be part of its future. Mariana is an example, a young woman who could have thrown up her hands and said, "I'm undocumented, I'm not going to have any way of legally being part of America, my dreams are just going to be put on hold." But she didn't. She was determined to make the best of her life, and then when President Obama created DACA, a door opened for her that she didn't imagine. She had the opportunity to move from medical assistant to become a nurse, and she's studying at Rutgers for that purpose. Really, Mr. President, do you think New Jersey or America would be better if Mariana is deported out of this country? As soon as next week, maybe even next Monday, the United States Supreme Court is about to rule on the future of DACA. The President of the United States can solve this problem if they decide that DACA is to be abolished. He can fix this himself. There's another person who has a critical role too, and that's Senator McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate. He has the power to bring this issue to the floor of the Senate for a debate and a vote. The House of Representatives has already passed the Dream and Promise Act, which would solve the challenge that would be created if the Supreme Court abolishes the DACA program. Are we overwhelmed with business in the United States Senate as I peer on an empty chamber with my wonderful speech being the only thing as an item of business at this moment? We have time. We have more than enough time to deal with this issue. And for 800,000 protected by DACA, it is literally a life and death issue. I would appeal to Senator McConnell to use his power as the Republican leader to solve this problem, to address this issue, to say that if you have qualified for the DACA program, you are going to be protected to the end of the year, or beyond that, given an opportunity to become a citizen of the United States, a goal which I have been seeking for the 20 years that I've worked on the DREAM Act. We know that we need the help of wonderful young people like Mariana Galati to make this a better nation. The question is whether the president ever will realize that, or whether Senator McConnell would make room in our schedule for us to debate this issue. Let's get this right. Let's make sure that we have sensible immigration policies in America. And the notion of abolishing DACA and saying to Mariana, you will now be deported back to a country you cannot even remember, is not the answer. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.